Good afternoon. So I'm going to talk about some work that I've been driving for the last 5 years or so, and it's really, the summary is in search of new value. So where is the new value in the world as we go forward? And you know, as you start to think about where we've come from a little bit, we've moved out of farming as being the way in which we grew foods and created value for ourselves. As the Industrial Revolution kind of transformed that and started to automate a lot of the work that people did, we've also found new ways of creating value. So computers came along where we had halls of people working in the back of banks doing clerical work. That's been replaced by computers. And today what's happening is, in essence, apps that we have on our mobile phones are replacing work that's being done in call centers in different parts of the world. So over time, machinery replaces what people do, whether we like it or not. And so fundamentally, we started asking the question, okay, if we look at the UK GDP as of last year, $2.445 trillion, you can see how it breaks down there. We know that the service industries are going to go through a big transformation. Services represent 75% of the UK GDP. This is not just a UK number. It's actually a very similar number right around the world. Even in China, the China GDP, 60% of that is based on service industries. Right? So we have a tremendous challenge with trying to understand what comes next. And if you read work from people like Carlota Perez, people like Dan Pink, they all represent different views of what's coming in the future. And in essence, you can describe it as digital economy or information economy, and those kind of concepts become very relevant. So as you start to think through what's coming down the future, we can summarize it in four ways. So if you look at the value chain of how we've moved, the basic verb that represents the agricultural or the basic industries, the natural resource-based industries, you can talk about as farming or mining. As we started to develop, we learned how to make things, so the manufacturing industry underpins the make world. And as we move then into the services base, it's about serve, so we want to try and serve people. Right? But where we're moving into this digital economy is about informing, it's about providing new insights, it's about the experiences that you have as you interact between individuals, interact between enterprises, or interact between enterprise and individual. and this fundamentally starts to help us understand where things are going forward. And as our research has progressed, we've actually found that technology is allowing us to create completely new capabilities. And they represent insight into how the value will transition from different parts of these economies into new places. And there are 5 patterns, and I'm going to take you through those patterns very quickly, but they'll give you some perspectives on where the new value comes. So the first one is what we call augment products. So physical products, as a product leaves the manufacturing gates, you lose contact with that product. Technology can be embedded onto that product, so you then maintain contact with the product. So think about the glass that's there in front of you, the mug. At the moment, the manufacturer of the mug knows nothing about where that mug has come from, what it's going, other than it left the factory gates. We can embed technology into that mug so it would know whether you're drinking tea, coffee, whether you're drunk or not drunk, whether it's appropriate for you to drink this or not. Those kind of technologies do exist. It's just that we haven't thought through how they're going to be applied. So that notion of augmented products is a big sort of transformation going forward. As you think about service industries, whatever you do, whatever an individual does through the service industry can get embedded into software, and that can then be provided through the cloud and provided for a fraction of the cost that an individual would do that for. And that provides a completely new set of capabilities, so you can think about codified services as the way of taking what you do in the service industry and transforming that. Interconnect industries, as you think about a value chain where you've got a number of organizations working together, the value that spans those are segmented because of the natural boundaries that exist between each of the organizations. And in fact, if you can bring all the information related to those entities, or those organizations in one place, and start to share that information, you reduce the cost and you maximize the efficiency, you optimize that value chain. So that's the third pattern that we call interconnect industries. The fourth pattern says trade information. So the fact that you have data which runs your business can be of value to adjacent organizations. How do you trade that data and make that data, turn that into real money? And I'll give you some examples in a second. The fourth one is saying a digital representation of a physical product creates new ways of interacting with that product. And so, think about e-books, think about e-music as an example. Your digital representation of those transformed the way those industries worked. But going forward, think about what 3D printing does to the manufacturing industry. Because I've got a product today, it's not going to be too far away that I can take a digital representation of that physical product and have it manufactured in the same way. So those are the 5 patterns that we see represents the transition from today into the kind of digital economy that's emerging. So let's just explore those in a bit more detail. So first pattern, as I said, physical product. I can attach sensors, connectivity into that product and transform it. That's exactly how Rolls-Royce now no longer sells aero engines, they sell power by the hour. They have 1,000 sensors inside the engine itself, and they transform the product into a service. Similarly, the ball bearing industry, they're losing something like 4.5 billion a year in counterfeit bearings by making smarter bearings, which not only just allow the lubrication of the work to, the machinery to move, they become sensors inside machinery. And those sensors allow us to monitor remote machinery. So for example, a big turbine, a wind turbine in some extreme places, I can monitor that now through the sensor. And that sensor, which is actually the ball bearing, becomes my way of maintaining contact with that physical product. Now those are very big examples, but you can think of that in terms of cars, think about it in terms of TV, smart TVs, all of those things. By embedding technology into the product allows us to create a complete new interaction pattern with that product itself. So second example I said was codify services. So anything that you do, your business is a set of service groupings. All the people that work in the organization have a set of work to do, replacing what they do, aggressively transforming that into software and making it available to the adjacent marketplace allows you to take value from your adjacent marketplace into your own entity. And the more you do that, the more value you can capture for yourself against the others. And examples there, some of the telcos doing some of the digital media. So some of the retail groups are using that as a way of creating a catalog structure. So think about a virtual catalog as an example of that. A catalog used to be a physical product, but the processes of how they create the catalog are quite unique and repeatable elsewhere. By making that available through the web, I can access catalog capabilities in lots of different spaces. Interconnect industries is a third pattern. And the example I want to draw you to is the Rio Smart Cities project that we've had there. Here, Rio was facing the challenge of how do I cope with the World Cup that's coming in next year and then the Olympics in 2 years' time. And the challenge, of course, was that they had some landslides. They had thousands of people, in fact, tens of thousands of people lost their homes. Many people died because of floods and the landslides that occurred. How could they get to a point where they were confident that they weren't going to impact any of these global stars that were coming into Rio? And so the challenge was understanding that. And what we did actually is to bring together the range of providers of things like the transportation, the energy providers, the defense. By bringing them together, bringing the information that they all had, we could start to predict where the landslides were likely to occur. We used modeling data to figure out the rainfall patterns. We could accurately predict at a half a square kilometer chunk what the rainfall pattern was going to be. We could predict the likelihood of flooding at that point, and we could then respond to that. By bringing all the organization together, we can actually respond to potential disasters. So that's some of the examples. We're working with some cities in the UK looking at exactly this. So how does the city administration take what they do, standardize it, make it available on the web, and then start to transform the ways in which they provide services, providing for a fraction of the cost, and create greater value and impact greater people's lives. Transforming data into information is a fascinating one, and the best example actually here is Vodafone. So Vodafone today will monitor the speed and trajectory of your handsets. That information is then sold to TomTom as real-time traffic data. Right. So you wouldn't think that just the fact that you've got a mobile phone going at a certain speed on the highway would be of value. By aggregating that information, you get real-time traffic data. A couple of other examples, we work with the Met Office looking at the notion of open platform. So how can climate data, rather than just being being used by the BBC to tell you whether you should take an umbrella with you today or not. How can we use that data to be able to predict storm damage and flood risk against properties? Right? That's a phenomenal marketplace, and that really allows us to apply this pattern in a completely different way. Also, other mobile phone providers are trying to say, we capture a huge amount of data on the individuals. We know when and how you're using different apps on your phones. How can that information be monetized in completely new ways? And the last pattern, as we talked about, was digitize assets. Some very simple examples in the news industry where they're digitizing various aspects of the media that they capture. But the really interesting things are in the manufacturing space. So digital representations of different things. That's an aero example we're working on right now where we're trying to capture all the information about the product so they can simplify the ways in which they interact with litigation. So downstream, when you get to a litigation problem, you don't have all that aggregated information. So digitizing all the information related to the design process gives them a much better way of responding. But there are many other use cases here, especially around things like 3D printing that I talked about earlier. So they're the patterns that we see. So what is it about an enterprise that makes them succeed in this way? So the first one is to realize that adjacency matters. So understanding how you fit in your ecosystem and who really works with you, your client set, your partners, your suppliers, and leveraging your core competence in the way that helps you leverage your value in the right way. But you've got to earn that market permission. So you've got to earn the permission to apply your capability in this kind of one of these patterns. The second thing is differentiation. You've got to be able to differentiate what you have in a way which is quite unique. So you've got to have a maintainable set of advantages. There's no point in doing it as a one-off because you can't sustain that. Right? So as you start to think about applying that in a more global scale, it becomes very, very important. But also being able to serve the individual needs. So more and more, this is not about you interacting with a corporation. It's an amorphous mass out there. This is about one-to-one interactions. It's now possible through technology to maintain a very clear one-to-one interaction. And being able to maintain that at scale is a key challenge. So it comes back to scaling ecosystems. So you've got to do this in not just a one-to-one way, but leveraging a whole set of people that work together. So more and more we see small, medium businesses working together to effectively behave like a large corporate. So using some of these components, they can come together and interact, and that ecosystem responds in a new way, and you start to co-create value. So it's not just about what I can do on my own, it's what we can do as a collective to address ourselves to a market opportunity in a new way. And that's a key part of one of the patterns. And the last part is to have a dynamic operating model, to be able to serve and share value in a completely new way. And ultimately, you've got to scale your business. You don't know whether this idea that you have is going to be addressable to the 10 people that you deal with today, the 1,000 people, or the billion people, or the 7 billion people around the world. And that's a phenomenal challenge. So what we start to see in these enterprises, they're able to scale this. They're able to respond to the market pressures in a way in which they can scale depending upon the demand. So they have partners who can do what they do, which allow them to scale in new ways. Or they can have a supply chain which can then bring new product and new capability on board to be able to respond to the scaling needs. So these are some of the challenges that we see. But as you start to think through this more and more, you start to realize actually the ways in which this works is the notion of standardization. So all of these new ideas represents a new business platform. So you do business based on your people, process, and technology that you have today. And you do that based on what you have in your internal platforms. To really have the market permission and market scale, you've got to become the industry platform. So just as Google started off with a small set of capabilities in a small enterprise, or as Facebook started in Stanford, they scaled globally. So they become the industry standards. And more, what you do, you've got to deliver value across the platform to everybody, and you've got to start to become the global standard. And that's where you start to survive. Now you might say, well, that's not applicable to everybody. Yeah, of course, it's not applicable to the small businesses that have certain ambitions. But we're still seeing the standardization occur globally. So even a restaurateur might think, I don't have a competition here. But in reality, you get global chains that are doing the same thing as they do on a standardized global way. So the kind of global nature of business means competition isn't necessarily next to you. The competition is global. And therefore, as you start to think through these patterns, how they apply to you in terms of innovation, you've got to aim to become the industry platform to really maintain your market permission for the future. And the last point I want to come back to is, how do you do this? How do you think about this in your business? The future value is something that is very difficult to define. And I want to come back and talk to the security issues here as well, because ultimately it's about creating the right idea. So the idea generation part of it, when you're facing a transformation, you might have an established business. When you want to try and innovate, you face what's called a blank sheet problem. Somebody says, now, tomorrow, I want you to innovate. And you go numb because you don't know how to think about what innovation really means. So these patterns provide you a way of generating some of the ideas. They give you a structure to start to think about the business models. They start to think about what the vision of the platform is that you want to have going forward, how you're going to change the people, process, and technology that makes the platform, and then how do you deliver the value. So coming back to the security issues, so each one of these patterns represents tremendous opportunity from a business perspective, but tremendous risk from a technology perspective, tremendous risk from a security perspective. And as security professionals, one of the challenges that you face is, how do you stay at a pace of understanding the security implications of these? So if I have the glass which now knows that I'm drunk and I shouldn't be drinking anymore, what's the security implication of that? How do I think about that? Because now I can embed security in ways that I hadn't thought about before. Each one of these patterns represents a model for how security can be embedded in a new way. Okay, and that's not just about the security process that we have. The intelligence needs to be applied into the security process as well. So each one of them provides a tremendous amount of opportunity for applying security techniques and a tremendous amount of risk that we hadn't thought about before. So I wanted to share these patterns really as a way for you to think about the opportunities and risks coming forward. Because unless you start thinking these ways, as we enter the digital economy, we're not going to really be ready to cope with this. And there's a tremendous amount of question in terms of the legal structure. What is the legal implications? Because we quite frankly don't know that. The ethics, so what's ethical and not ethical about applying these technologies and these patterns in new ways? And then fundamentally, what's it really mean from a social contract perspective? What's going to be acceptable and not acceptable from a social perspective? Those are big challenges that we face. Each one of these are massive questions that we all need to work together to solve. Because fundamentally, if we don't understand these patterns, understand how business value is evolving, we're not going to be able to capture the value for UK and UK industries going forward. That's it. Thank you.